penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Welcome. This fine San Francisco Saturday morning where you're not quite sure if it's raining out there or if it's a lovely mist or if it's going to be so hot that you have to peel off layers and layers of clothing. So I enjoy these mornings very much because you never quite know what's going to happen. My name is Mary, and I'm very happy that you all are making this part of your Saturday. So thank you for coming here. Thank you very much for the Tonto Tim for the invitation to speak today. How many people are here for the very first time? Welcome. 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 This Zendo, before it was a Zendo, was a ballroom. And now it's an acoustically different Zendo. It's kind of cool. That used to be a stage, and they used to have Saturday night parties here when this was a home, a residence for single women who were courting. And the supervising was very strict for the courting, and probably there wasn't a lot of shenanigans going along when they were dancing here. And then it became a Zendo. I think there's probably a lot of joy in these walls, and it has also held a lot of pain. So I lived at San Francisco Zen Center for many years. I've lived at all three temples, and this is the first time that I've worn brown in these walls. So this came to me this summer, and one of the serious questions I had this morning was, do I wear the lined okesa or do I wear the unlined okesa? I do not know the answer to that question because I sat first and then now I'm giving a talk. So I went with the unlined okesa because it was the first thing that happened today rather than the second thing that happened today, which seemed very Zen to me. Clothing is a big thing. And there are some wonderful sewing teachers in the room. Ilaria, it's lovely to see your face. And others who supported me while I was sewing. So I'm grateful to all of the support I received in order to be wearing this color. Before I came to Zen Center, I never wore black and I never wore brown. So this is a remake of the person who I imagined that I would be in my life. So I have been talking and thinking a lot about practicing in community. My current job is working for San Francisco Zen Center, which owns a limited liability company called Zen Inspired Senior Living, which is in partnership with a Quaker organization called Kendall to build a community called Enso Village in Healdsburg. And for more than the last year, I've been working on that project. And why I've been thinking about community is because the folks that moved into that place, many of whom have been long-term practitioners, have never lived in community. They've thought they'd like to live in community, and they put their money down to live in community, and many of them are now living in community, and some have moved out of community after moving in to community. And for those of you who either live at San Francisco Zen Center or have lived in a community, you might know, you might realize that living in community brings up things. One of the things that I thought about recently is there's this idea of 5 tastes that our tongue can pick up. So there's sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and savory. And I kind of think of savory as, well, that was interesting. That feeling like, oh, that was interesting. Living in community brings up all these things. There are people who you are with, you think, oh, sweet. There are people you were with and you think, oh, sour. Oh, that's kind of a salty thing. So I think we have responses to others in community. And although we have an idea that living by ourselves in a cave and practicing diligently is a good way to practice, and that we'd probably get really good at it. We'd be successful. There would be nobody bothering us. The idea of living in a cave is so you can actually come back and be of help. So community, living with others, feeling like, oh, that was rough, helps us to live in the world. And there's a story of Suzuki Roshi and a student the student was living at Tassajara for a while, and then he disappeared. And about 101 days later, he came back to the valley and he said, Suzuki Roshi, I just did the most amazing thing. I did 100-day sesshin. I was disciplined. I learned so much. I'm a great practitioner. And Suzuki Roshi completely rejected the idea that was a sesshin. He called it something like, I don't know the words exactly, but selfish practice. So it is in community that there's this push and pull. And through that push and pull, the liking, disliking, the discomfort, the comfort, we begin to soften. And it is that softening that Suzuki Roshi calls practice. Being kind to oneself. There's an essay that I've read it many times, and in that essay, Suzuki Roshi says that a kind mind is true practice. Which I have thought a lot about. A kind mind is true practice. So for most of us, the reality of our life is that we don't live in a cave. We don't live completely alone. We're not isolated. We flow in and out of different spaces where there are other people. And there are considerations that are mentioned in many different cultures around right speech. And I've been thinking a lot about right speech lately. So right speech is one of the headings or the areas to pay attention to in the Eightfold Path. And in the area of right speech, which is the third element, they talk or they list abstaining from lying, abstaining from divisive speech, abstaining from abusive speech, and abstaining from idle chatter. There's a lot of information in the Dharma about our speech. And I would propose that it's not just about what we're saying, but what we're saying to ourselves. So right speech isn't just me talking to Tim, it's the messages that I tell myself. That's part of right speech. So if I'm looking in a mirror and I'm saying, oh, I don't like the way I look, that's part of what we're talking about with the idea of right speech. And I would propose that it's the lion's share of what we're talking about, because if one is always engaged in negative self-talk, then one cannot really be engaged in the opposite with other people. So, as in many practices in Buddhism, this starts here first and then moves out. So the considerations, the request for these is that before you say something, there's a pause. And this is how Zazen works into this, because Zazen trains us to be able to pause. We pause before we move because we're uncomfortable. We pause when we realize we're thinking about the delicious meal we had last night, and we come back to our body, the present moment. So Zazen trains us through repetition to pause and come back. And these considerations train us, if we can remember, to pause before we say that thing that causes us shame, regret, remorse, division. Before we say those things, we pause and we consider these things. The first thing to consider is, and I'm going to often say these in different ways because we respond to words differently, each of us. So hearing some phrase to one person might mean absolutely nothing, but hearing it said with different words might mean something. So there's some repetition here. So the first consideration is that thing I want to say true? Is that thing I want to say true? Another way to say it is, do I speak of facts or not? And these aren't facts according to Mary, my feelings and perceptions. These are objectively supported facts. This thing actually is true. It happened. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about this question of, is it a fact? This consideration is so important that there's a grave or clear mind precept about this one. And it's precept number 4. And at San Francisco Zen Center, it's translated as, I vow to refrain from false speech. Norman Fisher translates that as, knowing how deeply our lives intertwine, I vow to tell the truth. And at Zen Mountain Monastery, it is stated, manifest truth, do not lie. There's a really interesting study that I read about around this consideration of not lying. We have a part in our brain called the amygdala, and they studied the activity of the amygdala among a number of test people. And what they asked the person to do was, at the beginning of the trial, tell a very small lie. And I think they might have given them a script. So tell a very small lie. And the person who's saying it knows it's a lie. So tell a lie. And when they did that, they measured this amygdala, and there was a ton of activity. So it was just like, danger, 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 you're lying, you know you're lying. And the activity that was happening in that part of the brain was really significant. So that person was then instructed to start fabricating the lie. So giving more details, making it bigger. And what was happening was, as the lie was getting more, like, I'm saying this thing and I'm not so alarmed by it anymore, the amygdala wasn't alarmed anymore. So the energy of the amygdala got smaller and smaller and smaller until this person was telling an all-out, full detailed, bald-faced lie, and the amygdala was doing nothing. So they did tests along this line, and what they found out was, if you don't lie very much, a lie causes this amygdala to have a lot of activity. If you lie a lot, there's no activity. So our brain actually gets trained, or it becomes completely okay with the idea that I tell lies all the time. So it is it's an effort to tell little lies when we don't lie very much. And what this consideration about is rely on the brain and yourself to pay attention to that effort and not lie. Because if you do it a lot, you won't have as many breaks anymore. And I think it also plays out for all of us when we lie to ourselves. So if we are looking at ourselves in the mirror and we are saying to ourselves mean, horrible things, then after a while we become inured to that. So again, the effort is to think about approaching ourselves and other people in a way that is true. The second consideration is, are my words kind? Another way to say it is, do I speak with a kindly heart, or am I inwardly malicious? Or am I speaking with a mind of goodwill? When I first the first summer I was at Tassajara, there was a fellow that I worked with a lot. And he said, I will always sacrifice kindness to be clever. And it was extremely difficult to have a conversation with him because it always felt like he was throwing darts. And sometimes it was like a spear. So that kind of hard-edged conversation that it's probably not meant to hurt, but it's like difficult, you know. I lived in a place once where culturally it's thought to be a sign of intellect to be confrontational and to be kind of right all the time. And we used to call it death by 1,000 cuts. So it's that feeling of always having to protect yourself from the speech of somebody else because it's wounding. And I think, again, we do this to ourselves. We talk to ourselves in a way that's wounding. So this consideration is about stopping before you engage in that and think, am I speaking with goodwill? Are these words meant to be kind? It doesn't always mean nice. It doesn't mean sappy sweet. It means kind. You can say hard things in a kind way. The third consideration is, are my words helpful? Another way, are my words beneficial? Another way, are my words profitable or not? The instructions from the Buddha are to spread words worth treasuring. So do we speak in a way that supports a situation, or do we speak in a way to tear it down? And of course, sometimes we imagine we're saying things in a way that supports the situation. And then we realize that what we said is not beneficial. So the request is to keep talking. Find out the injury. Be curious about what that reaction or response was, and look into the situation. The fourth consideration are my words conducive to harmony? The Buddha guides us to not tell there what we have heard here. So, are we creating social harmony? Are we creating inner harmony? The third and the fourth consideration are reflected by the 6th and the 7th grave or clear mind precepts that we take when we take refuge, when we become ordained, when we become Dharma transmitted, because these are extremely important precepts. Precept number 6 at Zen Center is, I vow not to slander. Norman Fisher's offering on that 6th precept is, knowing how deeply our lives intertwine, I vow not to dwell on the faults of others. And at Zen Mountain Monastery, it is, see the perfection. Do not speak of others' errors or faults. Precept number 7 at San Francisco Zen Center is, I vow not to praise self at the expense of others. Norman's is, knowing how deeply our lives intertwine, I vow to speak of the virtues of others and our interdependence with them. Zen Mountain Monastery, realize self and others as one. Do not elevate self and blame others. There is a lot of Dharma about speech. About how we can examine our tendencies and be aware. And that awareness changes the way I often use the language because it makes sense to me. It's like it changes the shape of our mind. And then the 5th consideration is, are my words spoken at the right time? Can a person hear it at the moment I want to say it? I'm sure many of you have had the experience, I like to call it a drive-by. So you're going to lunch and somebody comes up to you and says, in many different types of words, you're a jerk. And then they turn around and walk the other way. So you're not prepared for a conversation with this person. You're on the way to somewhere and this event happens. This is what they're talking about with this consideration. We have to pick our time. Through many painful experiences, I have come to realize that if I want to engage somebody, particularly if I have feedback for them, it's really my obligation to myself is to ask them or email and say, I have something I'd like to say to you. It's a difficult thing for me. Are you willing to hear me? If so, when would work for you? So you're preparing for a conversation that they can participate in. And they can choose to say yes, and they can choose to say no. And that's up to them. It does mean that you won't get yourself into hot water immediately because you're thinking about what it is you're going to talk about. You've given yourself the pause button. And so you're thinking about this thing that is important. I'm thinking about this thing that's important to me, and I'm interested in what the other person or how the other person will engage. So it's about curiosity. So these considerations, like many practices, are easy to forget. And they can be summed up in one phrase, which is almost more easy to forget. But I'll tell it to you anyway. The phrase is, "May my mind be kind." If you're wanting to say something harsh, and if you can remember that phrase, "May my mind be kind," you will pause. If you're criticizing yourself for not being good enough, and you remember the phrase, "May my mind be kind," you will change the tone of the voice that you're using to talk to yourself. It is a powerful phrase. And it's easy to forget. When I was looking for these phrases, these considerations, I was interested to note that they came up from many different cultures. So apparently Socrates, and I quote, "Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary?" It's known as the triple filter test. There's an acronym, THINK, T-H-I-N-K. T, true. H, helpful. I, inspiring. N, necessary. K, kind. There was a spiritual leader who died in the early part of the 20th century who was very revered by both Hindu and Muslim cultures, and he said, before you speak, ask yourself, is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it true? Does it improve on silence? His name was Shirdi Sai Baba. And if you want, you can buy a plaque on Amazon that says those words, made out of wood for $36.99. And then there was a Victorian poet, her name is Mary Ann Pitzker, and she wrote a poem called "Is It True? Is It Necessary? Is It Kind?" I have it in case I thought I would read it. It's kind of Victorian, like super wordy. And you're not quite sure what she's saying until you read it 5 times. But it's interesting that's the title of the poem. Is it true? Is it necessary? Is it kind? So I think for human beings, being with other human beings is something we do. And I think hoping to get along isn't going far enough. We have to do something about it. And that's why I like these considerations, because it allows me to do something about it. It allows me to reflect before I say those injurious things. And change the tone, change the words, change the feeling I have. Suzuki Roshi says in a lecture called Be Kind to Yourself, from the book Not Always So, when you do things with warm-hearted mind, that is actual practice. That is how to take care of things. That is how to communicate with people. I was doing a workshop with a Tibetan Rinpoche, Khandro Rinpoche, and she said, if after some time in practice you're not kinder, you're not practicing. Change teachers, change your practice. She was really... and I think about that often. I think about how some of you will remember Blanche Hartman. My partner knew Blanche when Blanche was formidable. And some of you will know that. She lived and practiced at Zen Center for, 40 years. And when she was in her 60s and 70s, she was really tough, apparently. Scary. I knew her when she was, late 80s, and she just wanted to hug people. Smile. Her heart was mushy, soft. She was sweet. And I wouldn't mistake it for something other than practice, actually. I think that was a culmination of years and years and years of serious Zen practice. This warm, kind person. In the loving kindness meditation we use, I think often of the words suffusing love over the entire world, above, below, and all around, without limit. So let one cultivate an infinite goodwill toward the whole world. Our ego wants us to be individuals with piercing intellect and always right. To shine energetically and brightly. To throw spears. The Dharma is asking us to be kind and loving. So I think that's enough for me. And I have been told by the Tonto that the practice is for folks to stand up and stretch before we do anything else. So please, stand up and stretch.
That was really wholehearted stretching. It was really wonderful to watch. If you have a question, please raise your hand. I'll bring the microphone over to you.
Thank you so much for the Dharma talk. I just had a question about forgiving yourself when you've fallen short with your communication towards others. And if you could just talk a little bit about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, I mean, that's a tough one for all of us, self-forgiveness. It can be tough to forgive other people, but I think forgiving ourselves is tough. So generally, not just with saying the wrong thing to somebody, but the idea of self-forgiveness is worth noticing. When you're going about your life, whether it's around speech or whether it's around action, what are you saying to yourself? And noticing that can be extremely powerful, because I have found that for most people, we don't know the level of self-negative talk that we're engaging in. So we can be caught off guard by that. And I think that the idea of noticing the messages that you're telling yourself allows that to start changing. And to bring that same feeling of kindness, that warmth, that it doesn't help to go, oh, stop being so... It's more like the patience we use for a very young child who's doing something that's not helpful. The idea is to not slap that child. The idea is to redirect that effort. And so I think for us, it's noticing and then redirecting the message. And then when we get better at that, I believe that that allows us to, when we've said something painful to another person, and we know we've hurt them, we can forgive ourselves for hurting them and then have a conversation with them about what actually happened. I think that when we carry that lack of forgiveness to ourselves into the conversations with other people, they know that. That feeling, our own aggression towards ourselves becomes part of that conversation with the other person. So I think it's a longer process of noticing our self-talk, forgiving ourselves for that, making some adjustments, and then realizing when we're doing that with other people, and again, making adjustments. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to say the thank you for such an insightful talk. And as you can hear, I have a stutter, so it will take me longer to complete my question. My question is, how does one even stop themselves from having negative self-talk in the first place? And relatedly, especially when one is feeling emotional, how does one stop themselves from making the greatest speech that they will ever regret? Thank you.
Thank you for your bravery. So I think the pause that I talked about is important for us. You know that feeling that you have when you say something and you wish, as soon as it goes out of your mouth, you wish you could reach those words and grab them and pull them back. That thing that happens there happened over not even a second, right? So when we're talking about a pause, nobody can notice that you're pausing. It's like the instruction, if you get an email that you're pissed off, I'm not supposed to, if you get an email that you don't like, you write a response, then you don't send it right away, right? It's that sort of thing. So you're training into your responses a pause. And that sounds so easy. It's not. Which is why sitting practice is really helpful. It trains us to, my mind is telling me to move my leg. Why don't I wait 2 breaths? My mind is telling me that I don't like this experience. Wait. So it's allowing us to remember that we can move a little slower than what our mind is telling us to do. So that's extremely helpful. And sometimes when you have that pause, you can think, I do want to say this thing, but I want to say it in a different way. So it doesn't mean you can't offer feedback or you can't react to something. It's more like you get a chance to think, is this really what I want to say? Or is there a different thing to say? And then, so that answers kind of your second question, maybe. The negative self-talk, as I said to this other gentleman, I believe that it's vital for all of us to tune into the voice that we're talking to ourselves with. And part of the support for tuning into that voice is starting to tune into your body. Because often, for some people, it's when they're really negative towards themselves, their heart gets tight. Some people, their stomach clenches. Some people, their jaw clenches. So our body often can give us signals about how we're judging ourselves. So again, it's one of those things that if you're curious about what you're saying to yourself, genuinely curious, your body will tell you. And if you're willing to be curious about the message, it will start changing. If what you say is another self-talk thing, which is, oh, I'm speaking to myself in a negative way, stop doing that. Nothing's going to change. Because it's a negative message on a negative message. It's an untangling of old habits. And that untangling takes love and care and kindness.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
May I ask you a question about meditation practice?
Go for it.
Thank you. I resonate with your awareness practice where I'm just trying to rest in awareness when I'm meditating.
Mm-hmm.
And other times when I'm in the world, driving, washing dishes, walking, I'm just aware of what's happening. Maybe my feet moving. I ask this question because sometimes when I'm meditating, if I can't quite rest in that awareness, I find myself aware of what's happening, aware of the dog, aware of my mind. Are they really different?
Yeah, I'm smiling because I've been, as I said, reading these essays of Suzuki Roshi, and in his mind, I don't think they're that different. In meditation, in Zazen, if you hear the sound of a bird, and you don't then in your mind go, I wonder what kind of bird that is. That bird shouldn't be doing that. Oh, I don't like that bird. Or if a car is going by and the car goes by and you hear the sound, and if that's the end of the thought, that's awareness. So if you're driving and you see a driver cut in front of you, if the thought is, oh, the driver just cut in front of me, that's awareness. If you then go, I hate those kind of drivers, I'm going to speed up and I'm going to crash my car into that driver because that driver's, wah, 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 that's no longer awareness. And the hope is that by doing formal meditation, we're training in awareness in an environment that is not so complicated. It's more difficult when you're driving in a vehicle because there's so many other variables. Does that?
Yes, that's perfect. So just to make sure I understand, if I'm sitting and without engaging my mind about something that is happening in a sensation, don't beat myself up for not resting in that pure awareness. Just allow the awareness to be without engaging of this or that.
Yeah. My understanding at this time is that the point isn't to turn off your sensory information. The point is that if you're receiving sensory information, you're not embellishing on the information.
Perfect, thank you.
We have a question online. This question comes from Seishin, and Seishin writes, "Thank you so much for this talk. What does kind mean? If you couldn't use the word kind, what words would you use or replace?"
You know the smell of a baby's head or a puppy? Have you ever smelt a really young puppy? That smell, feeling, experience, I think is what we're getting, what we're moving towards here with the word kind. Suffusing love over the entire world. No sharp edges. Blanche before she moved out of this building when she was completely happy. I think it's a. I think we know in our body when our being is acting in a kind way. And I think it does go beyond words. So I appreciate the question a lot. Thank you, Seishin.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you for your talk today. I struggle with the question of is it true? Because I feel like in my life, the most difficult conversations I've had, and also just those that I see in the world, be it in politics or just going about daily life, sometimes come down to this feeling that there are multiple truths at play, and it can be hard to align on a truth. And so sometimes that question of is it true can be a little paralyzing to me, because I'm like, I don't know. I don't really know what that means. It still kind of feels like there's some perception there. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yes, that's a wonderful question, because I appreciate what you're saying around the complexity of the word as we understand it, or as we're experiencing it in the media, for example. And from the reading I did, it's really specifically about things that are objectively provable. So if I'm looking outside and I say to somebody, it's raining outside, that's me not saying something that's true. And they're not talking, in this consideration, they're not talking about things that are more unknowable. So I think they would use different language. I think we would think about a different consideration if we were talking about the political situation. I don't think we'd use the word, is it true? Does that make sense? We would maybe say, is it promoting harmony? Or something like that. So the use of the true in this sense isn't squishy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So for me to review the THINK, it's true, we've run out of time to be here today. I found your talk helpful and inspiring. It's necessary that we end now. And the K, kind. I kindly thank you for your talk today.
To every being and place, with the true merit of Buddha's way. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it.